Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome to you once again for another conversation from the couch occasion. It is so lovely to welcome you both. We are talking today because you are going to be presenting at our upcoming SASH conference in Seattle, which is thrilling. So why don't we kick off with you telling us what your presentation is going to be all about?
Okay. Well, the title of our presentation is Developing Healthy Intimacy, the Impact of Parents' Problematic Sexual Behaviors on Adult Children. So what we're really interested in attempting to get at is what this is doing to our children that is not being addressed. So when you think about somebody who may have had a problematic sexual behavior, they're not really thinking about the impact this is having on other people. And they especially want to wear blinders that this is having anything whatsoever to do with their children. So, and then the person who's in the betrayal trauma, they are so focused on their own trauma and their own pain, and it's really difficult to get to the point of understanding that this is also impacting their children. And then we add on the culture aspects that, you know, what happens to the parents has nothing to do with the kids, whereas it really has a lot to do with the kids. So,
thank you, Diane. Victoria, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, and to add to that, we're also looking at how this is multi-generational. And this is something that, you know, these are not only traumas that we're growing up with, and we're also revisiting them also as adults and teaching them also to our own children. So it's a repetitive cycle that can become very problematic and create these problematic sexual behaviors.
When you talk about young adult children, what sort of age range are you talking about specifically? Is there a specific age range you're addressing here?
Young, early 20s, and kind of mid-30s, early 30s.
And this is the population you're both working with specifically?
I do work with several young adults that are in that age range. I also work with the, well, not the same parents, but I also work with the adults that have the problematic sexual behaviors or that have been betrayed.
Yes, thank you. It's it's a very sensitive topic. I don't know whether you both know, but I work specifically with men who sometimes have suffered sexual abuse, sometimes not, but have always suffered some kind of trauma, or they wouldn't be coming to me to help rebuild their life.
Exactly.
But I am also a sex addict in recovery. So this is a subject that's very important to me, and will help. Listening to you two will help me better understand how to help my clients too. So thank you for this. Tell me, where do you see this subject being particularly important in terms of helping sexual health?
So we're seeing from even our research and what's been coming up from our focus groups is that this is something that is lifelong, and that even adults aren't addressing or aren't even acknowledging until well into their adulthood. They have, there's feelings of shame and betrayal and overall just lack of safety and trust, where they feel like they can discuss these issues in enclosed and even public spaces. Mm-hmm. So, and then just to kind of go off of that, I'm currently working right now as a hospital social worker. And we're looking at, and I don't think people realize how sexual health is so much tied to our physical health, how it's a mind and it's a body experience. And doctors now are looking at how chronic diseases are affected so much by our social impact as children. You know, they're not just treating the problem, they're also looking at the whole story of a person now. You know, how they grew up, what they were exposed to, whether that may be sexual abuse or domestic violence. And we're seeing how some of these issues are translating into chronic illnesses and how it has also a huge effect on our sexual health and on our intimacy and relationships. These are traumas that now are encoded in our DNA and are being repeated across generations. And so before we kind of get into the topic of adults and being in relationships, we need to start tackling that kind of like at the onset when you're a young adult and when you're developing intimacies and when you're developing relationships with other people.
Do you see any notable correlation between problematic sexual behavior in the parents directly leading to problematic sexual behavior in the children?
Yes. Some of the things that kind of came up in our focus groups was dependency on abusers, controlling situations, controlling relationships. We were also looking at how even for some people, they're not able to create healthy relationships because of the problematic sexual behavior that they experience with their parents.
And this is not necessarily, I mean, or maybe correct me, tell me, is the problematic sexual behavior of the parents, this isn't necessarily sexually abusing their children. This is just doing things of their own volition, or is it directly involving children, or is it a combination of both?
It's across the board. It's several of
Right.
those things. So there was a large percentage of people who responded being involved in their parents' sexuality of some sort or another, much more than I would have thought. I've been surprised by some of the results that we've been finding as we've been looking into this. From my overall way of the people that I'm working with, it's the inability to have healthy relationships, healthy intimacy, to hold boundaries that make sense. And their behavior, and mainly their problematic sexual behaviors, is putting themselves in risky risky positions, risking relationships, risking dating situations. So, and a lot of things that are not congruent with what they hold to be important and true. So they're operating against who and what they are, which is really a core part to what healthy sexuality is. If we're unable to be a congruent whole, to be able to realize that we're sexual beings, we have a hard time even living with ourselves because we're living against ourselves.
Thank you. I mean, sex has been so demonized for so long by so many different organizations, religions, time eras. I mean, we had the Victorian era, which crushed any sense of liberal sexuality in this country. I believe you had the Pilgrim Fathers, which did a wonderful job of doing something similar. So both our countries have in our history organizations or groups of people who have basically said that sex is bad, or being sexual is bad, and it should only be used for procreation, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, to then have a child who's influenced by problematic sexual behavior, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not going to lead to the greatest opportunity for a child to exhibit healthy behaviors. And hence what you're saying, they go into relationships in a very dysfunctional manner, a very dangerous manner.
Dangerous, confused, discombobulated.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but I've read a lot of stuff on how teenagers, especially male teenagers, enter early relationships basing their idea of sexuality on the pornography they've been watching since the age of 8. And then a little surprised when women don't quite want to do what they've been seeing in what can be devastatingly aggressive, violent pornography, which they've found because it pops up on their bloody iPhone at the age of 8 or 9 or 10. It's tragic. So yes, thank you for the work you're doing.
Or younger. Yeah.
Or younger.
Yeah.
God, is that what you're finding in the research?
Yeah, I mean, children are getting access to phones as early as 2, 3 years old. So,
Yeah.
Well, that's another whole subject, isn't it?
6-year-old in my practice who discovered her father's body parts on the cell phone. Yeah, so it's starting very young. And as long as our children have access to the internet, they're going to have access to inappropriate sexual materials.
Yeah. I mean, it does put a hugely important onus on parents to responsibly police the use of electronics, no?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ladies, what would you, if you could name a few things that you would love attendees to what I have no doubt will be a fascinating lecture, what would you like them to take away? Some of the key points you'd like them to walk away with from listening to you?
Well, one of the primary key points I'd like them to walk away with is that our children are walking camcorders from birth on. I think too many people believe that when their children are 2, 3, 4, that you can say do anything and it's not going to impact them. And that couldn't be more wrong. It carries on, and those tapes that they record in their brains as little children are part of their sexual script and become part of how they wire who and what they are for the rest of their lives.
mm-hmm.
I'm working with 70-year-olds that are still playing through the same script that they had as a young child. So yes, we want them to know that. And as you just mentioned, responsibility. It doesn't matter where it comes, but we're responsible to ourselves first, to our partners and our loved ones secondly, on what is it like to have a healthy, loving relationship? What does it mean to be a sexual being? It's a wonderful thing. So how do we do that? And I would really like our participants to walk away feeling charged up to make positive change, to do something that's really going to make a difference, that's going to protect our children as they grow up.
I love your
interesting note on this intergenerational trauma. Victoria here is my niece, so we're approaching this from an intergenerational point of view.
Wow. Well, thank you for pointing that out, because obviously I had no idea. Thank you. That makes this all the more fascinating for our audience. I love what you say about children being walking camcorders. I have a hunch you watched my presentation kindly last year, Diane, and I don't know whether you recall, this was one of my props. I use that as a prop. That is a sponge. And I love to make the analogy that when a child leaves the womb, they are a sponge. We are still sponges, and we sponge up everything that goes on around us. But I love your analogy of a walking camcorder. I think that's kind of more in tune with the times, rather than my sponge.
And I also want to piggyback off what Diane was mentioning about these scripts and how these scripts are coded in us and how they're multi-generational. We're looking at, while we're doing even our own work, how much of my behavior is even affected by maybe a family member hundreds of years ago, where that behavior is still being repeated across over generations. So again, and then another, to point on what a takeaway for our presenters would be, to reflect on where we come from and to reflect on our backgrounds.
Something very, very amazing happened here in my own home about 20 minutes ago. I got back from a ride. I'd been doing out exercising and did a good 10 miles and got back very hot and sweaty. And I have a very close friend staying here for this weekend. And I came back from my ride. I went to give her a hug and say hi. And as I did that, because I probably shouldn't have been hugging because I was too sweaty, but as I did so, she went, "My God, you remind me of my uncle." And I went, "Really?" She went, "Yes, you smell sort of cinnamony." And I went, "Well, that's a nice way to describe my sweat." And I said, "Isn't that interesting? You've just told me that just the smell of me in the state I happen to be in has reminded me of your uncle." And I said, "Did you have a," and I then went into, immediately into coach mode. I said, out of curiosity, did you have a good relationship with your uncle? She went, yes, he was a lovely fellow. A long time ago, it was 30, he died over 30 years ago. I went, oh, right, okay. But I said, that is gold dust to me, because you've just proven a fundamentally important point. My smell reminds me of you, of your uncle from over 30 years ago. Now imagine if your uncle had raped you. How different would your reaction be right now in this moment with me, with the smell of me having just reminded you of your uncle? And it was gold dust moment for me, because the work I do, because the work you do, there was living proof of the power of even the smell of something triggering a flashback straight back 30 plus years to her childhood. Luckily, it was a good one. Well, this is a happy conversation, but it shows me just how devastating things that go on in childhood can be. So that, I think that taps. I sort of thought, wow, this is just share that with you too, in light of the beautiful work you're doing. One final question would be, is there anything else you would like to tell audience looking at this preview of where you might be both or separately presenting, either before our conference or after, or shout out for your website or what you do, anything at all you would like to share?
Victoria, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, well, I am very excited to participate in the SASH conference. I just completed my certificate in sex therapy from the California Institute of Integral Studies. And so I'm thrilled to be around professionals that I can connect with, and I can nitpick other people's brains. And I'm totally looking forward to the information that I'll be getting from this conference. Yeah, and then I'm also looking forward to starting to create sex education curriculums for children at an elementary school level as well.
Well, I want to herald your success, say huge congratulations on your latest training, and how wonderful of what you speak of what you're going to create in the future. So thank you for what you're doing. Amazing. Congratulations, by the way. Diane,
and I would love for people to come to my website. It's www.aheart.com. I'm going to be doing a couple workshops starting this fall on the rabbit hole of betrayal. One's for the partners and one's for the person who did the betraying. I'm also really excited to be doing more research in this area and pursuing some grants so that I can further the research.
Amazing. Ladies, so thrilled to have you here. Thank you for talking so openly and with such fascination about what you're going to be presenting. And thank you for being a part of SASH. It's an amazing organization. I love being on the board and helping from that perspective, but to have people like you come to our conference is what it's all about. So thank you both so much for being with me today.